Opening. This is an audiobook recording of The Boss's Sweetest Delight, an political romance written by J.K. Jones and narrated by Quan Dawn and James Milton. This is an office romance between a boss and an employee that contains mature themes. No part of this audiobook may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form without the prior written permission of the author. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. This audiobook is serial and will be updated on March 15th or earlier depending on the author's schedule. If you'd like to hear more audiobooks, please like and subscribe. Thank you for respecting the hard work of the author, and we hope you enjoy this story. Chapter 1. Slade. I was married to my work. I didn't have time for romance. I didn't have time for love. Hell, I barely had time for self-love, though that was probably for the best, considering how my life was falling apart. And I definitely didn't have time for murder, but if anyone was going to drive me to it, it was Kieran Blackthorn. Just hearing his name made me want to strangle something, preferably him. But I knew Ellis wasn't going to let this go. My wife was leaving me. And as if that dumpster fire couldn't get any worse, my campaign manager of 4 years was jumping ship too. I shot Ellis a look that said, "Quit while you're ahead." But of course, he didn't even blink. I sighed, long, hard, and desperate, like a man who was about to implode. And sure enough, Ellis just kept going. "Look." Ellis steepled his hands over the desk, his gray eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. Ellis Wallace was the best damn campaign manager I'd had for the last 4 years in my riding, but I could tell the years were grinding him down like a dull pencil. His brow was carved with trenches deep enough to plant a garden, and his hands shook slightly. The beginnings of Parkinson's, though he was too damn stubborn to admit it. We were losing him to time, and it made something ugly crack open in my chest. "I'm no spring chicken," Ellis said, his voice gravelly. "We need fresh blood in here. The people are aching for it. Besides, we're losing, and if we lose any more, we'll be in the single digits. Victoria Sinclair is eating us alive in the polls, and unless we changed strategy yesterday, hell, last week, we're toast." "Yeah, but—" "No buts, Slade," Ellis hissed, jabbing a shaky finger at me like a grumpy father scolding his idiot son. "This is non-negotiable. 14 campaigns I've run for the Harrington dynasty." "I wouldn't exactly call it a dynasty," I muttered. "And we've never lost," Ellis barked, ignoring me. "We will not lose this campaign, so buck up. Make nice with Cecilia. Tell her she can have her divorce after you're re-elected. Hell, tell her she can have the house, the dog, and the yacht if she wants. But for now, smile like you're still in love, damn it." "Cecilia never liked the dog," I grumbled. "Good. Then maybe she'll let you keep it," Ellis snapped. "Now listen up. I'm bringing in Kieran tomorrow, and I don't want to hear a damn thing about it. You're going to suck it up, shake his hand, and pretend he's not a pain in your ass. Got it?" I sighed, dragging a hand down my face. "Fine, but I'm putting it on record that Kieran smells like stale cigarettes and bad cologne." "And yet he wins campaigns," Ellis shot back, smirking for the first time in weeks. "Now get out of my office before I give you another lecture about why you don't have the luxury of being picky." I turned to leave, muttering under my breath. I'd take another lecture if it meant I didn't have to call Cecilia. "She married you, Slade. The least you can do is try to sound like you're worth the trouble," Ellis hollered after me, his laugh gravelly but genuine. I strolled out of Ellis's office, already annoyed at the thought of having to replace him. He'd been with me since the beginning, back when I was just a loudmouth wannabe senator preaching from my soapbox, trying to live up to my father's legacy. The Harringtons came from a long line of politicians, stretching all the way back to the 1800s. Ever since I was a kid, my life had revolved around politics. It didn't matter whether we leaned left or right. What mattered was the game itself. Politics wasn't just a career in my family. It was everything. My father once called it a curse, but I'd never seen it that way. I had a fire in my gut to change the world for the better, to shape it into what it could be. My re-election wasn't just important. It was necessary to make that vision a reality. The gymnasium was alive with activity when I walked in. Campaign posters lined the walls, their bold slogans shouting promises into the cavernous space. Tables were stacked with brochures and pamphlets that volunteers handed out to anyone walking through the doors. American flags and red, white, and blue streamers hung from the ceiling. In one corner I spotted Dylan, his brown hair catching the light as he spoke animatedly to Kiara, one of our event coordinators. Her bob of bright red hair bounced with every step she took, her energy palpable even from a distance. Nearby, Sarah, our ever-reliable elderly volunteer, worked tirelessly, her sharp eye ensuring nothing slipped through the cracks. Then there was Kristen, the loudest voice in the room, directing the fundraiser efforts with the authority of a seasoned drill sergeant. I swallowed hard as I made my way to my office. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it for a moment, letting out a long, slow breath. My phone was buzzing in my pocket, and I quickly silenced it, heading straight to my desk and my computer. I knew Kira had a speech planned for a fundraiser later on today. Then we had a campaign strategy to go over, and after that, I'd have to prepare for the arrival of Kieran Blackthorn, the spawn of Satan, no doubt. I rubbed my temples. Okay, not going there. The phone in my office rang, and I picked it up immediately. Hey, Kiara, I just started working on my speech. Cecilia is on line 1 and she doesn't sound too happy, Kiara warned. Right. Yes. Thank you. I'll take it. I waited for the beep. Hello. You dog. Hello to you too, Cecilia, I muttered. Don't pull that bullcrap with me. Don't you know what time it is? Your daughter is on stage right now performing Swan Lake, and guess where her piece of crap father is? Not here. Not even a call or text message to let us know you weren't coming. You just didn't even show up. Damn it. I hurried to check my calendar and groaned when I saw that it was circled 3 times in red highlighter. I'm sorry, I can't make it. Heard that one before? Why don't you just tattoo it on your forehead at this point? Save us all the suspense, she hissed. I love how you keep insulting me. Is this a roast, or did you actually have something to say? Your daughter will be heartbroken if her father doesn't show up, Cecilia shot back. So, either you make it tonight, or I'll mysteriously come down with a terrible case of the flu for the entire rest of the campaign. The line went dead. God damn it, I hissed. Then I picked up the phone and called Ciara. She picked up on the first ring. Ciara, what time does the fundraiser start? 3 o'clock. Why? Is it code red? It's code freaking red, I muttered, and she sighed. All right, don't worry about it. We can stall until you arrive, but try not to be later than 4 o'clock. I'll have the limousine barcade ready to take you whenever you need to go in 20 minutes. You're amazing and I don't pay you enough, I sighed into the phone. Damn right you don't, Kiara shot back with a laugh, then hung up before I could respond. Christ, what time is it? I punched my fist into the air and checked the time on my Rolex Submariner. It was 11:45, which meant I had 3 hours to make it back here for the fundraiser event. I grabbed my coat jacket off the hooks and swung it over my shoulders, then hurried to the mirror in my office. I stared at my bright blue eyes and dark mocha hair, coiffed neatly at the top, and I hated what I saw. A failure as a husband, and soon to be a failure as a governor. I splashed cold water on my face and hurried out the door. I arrived at the school with several agents in tow, ignoring the questioning looks as I made a beeline toward the auditorium, which was pitch black. I stumbled my way to Cecilia, who sat at the front, her long ink-black hair pulled up into a messy bun, showcasing her beautiful olive skin. I crouched down and walked toward her, pressing a gentle kiss on her smooth cheek. Hey, sorry I'm late, I breathed. She hummed and moved over for me to sit down while the agent stood near the front. All the other little girls were in swan tutus that looked so adorable my heart melted. Stacy was front and center, standing out as the swan princess, with the other girls prancing around her. Where's Jace? I whispered, craning my head for my eldest son. Where else? Home, Cecilia clipped, turning her full attention to the stage. Right. Well, I guess the conversation was over. The play ended with a flurry of prances, and we all stood clapping our hands while the curtain came down. She was good. I'd have to look into seeing if she'd be interested in doing private lessons. I turned to tell Cecilia, but she was already packing up her stuff and heading for the door. Wait, I said to her. Maybe tomorrow we can… No, she deadpanned. You haven't even heard what I was about to say. My answer will always be no. Cecilia stared at me, and I wondered when her honey eyes started looking so dead. I knew it was too little, too late for us, that the man she married was long gone, swallowed up by the political pariahs and the bureaucrats. I loved her once, too. Quite desperately, I remembered. She had been a protester at one of my grandfather's rallies, screaming at the top of her lungs against the pollution of our cities by large corporations. Needless to say, my grandfather had her thrown out. But days later, she'd come back, and I had been so enamored I followed their little group until they stopped at a bar, their signs scattered around them as they plotted and planned their next protest around pints of beer and Mary Jane. Cecilia had loved all things back then, and she, like me, wanted to change the world. 10 years later, things were different. Very different. I ached for her sometimes, for the family I had given up to be governor, and all the sleepless nights I spent chasing a dream that was beyond my reach. Okay, I forced a smile, and then my little princess came bounding over. Daddy! She threw herself into my arms and I laughed while picking her up. Hey, Pumpkin, that was awesome! Who were you, a swan or a duck? A swan, Daddy, she pouted, still in her little swan tutu. Did you see how high I jumped? Mrs. Campton says I will jump even higher next year. Yeah, that was awesome. You almost flew through the roof, I replied, kissing her plump cheeks. Come on. Cecilia held her arms out. Let's get you changed. I passed Stacy off to her mother while she pouted. I assume you won't be coming to dinner tonight. No, there's a fundraiser at… Cecilia was already walking away with my daughter in tow. I tried not to let it get to me. Her dismissal. Over the years, I had neglected them, and I knew she hated me for it. I knew for certain that once the campaign finished, so were we. I shoved the thought away, heading back to the fundraiser just in time to see it in full swing. The energy in the room was electric, people from all walks of life laughing, talking, and clinking glasses. I raced over to the reporters where Dylan was snapping pictures of the crowd. How's it going? I called out, trying to catch my breath. Better now that you're here. Dylan smiled at me, his kind eyes crinkling with amusement. His jawline was sharp, and his dark hair was always perfectly styled, making him look like the kind of young investigative journalist who belonged in the pages of a magazine, rather than trailing behind a political campaign. He had followed us with the rest of the media from the start, but I always found him more easygoing than the rest. Look, it's a madhouse, and I think I saw some protesters with pink spray paint in the back, wearing tattoos of cruelty-free animals and slogans like, "Save the turtles," all over their bodies. Don't joke, I snorted a laugh, shaking my head. I'm kidding. You're good, man, Dylan said, giving me a reassuring pat on the back. He flashed me a grin that could disarm anyone in a room. Go knock 'em dead. Before I could say anything else, my name was announced. The crowd turned to face me, the lights flashing in all directions. I raised my hands in acknowledgement, the hum of anticipation filling the room. Taking a deep breath, I strode to the podium. Showtime. I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt, but the familiar rush of talking to the crowd was still buzzing through me. Let me know the results of the fundraiser. I'm hoping we can get more undecided voters once this is over. Sierra nodded as she walked beside me, her ruby heels clapping on the floor. Sir, what about the campaign? I know you spoke with Ellis, but it might be better if I had an understanding of what's happening. That way I can prepare the interns. We haven't decided on hiring Kieran yet. I cut her off as we strode to my office. I don't want that pompous ass closer to me than necessary. The words died in my throat when I saw Kieran standing in my office. Damn it. Always rays of sunshine when I see you, Kieran said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. He wore a black and white striped suit that made his shoulders appear impossibly wide and his waist extremely narrow. My throat went dry and I looked away from him. Where the hell is my security? We can't just let the crazies in because they dress nicely, I said to Kiara, who bit back a laugh. Well, should I ring a gong or are you guys going to fight right here and now? Kieran rolled his eyes and Kiara laughed. I'll see myself out, boss, she said as she left. Let me guess, I said, closing the door behind her. Ellis called you and you jumped at the chance to ruin my life. Your guess is correct, but I'm not sure I could ruin it any further than it already is, Kieran replied, his mouth thinning into a hard line. You're tanking. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Anything else you want to point out? I snapped, rubbing my temples. I meant to say you're cratering, Kieran said, adjusting his stance near the full-length window. The sunlight streamed through, illuminating his vibrant green eyes, which seemed to gather all the colors of the spectrum and trap them in their depths, making them almost hypnotic. It's pitiful, really, how much you need me to come clean up your mess. That's the spirit, I deadpanned. Newsflash. I don't need you for anything. You call that pathetic fundraiser anything? Talking to small-town newspapers because you want to avoid the big dogs? You're hiding, Slade. Don't think I haven't noticed. Your wife is MIA. Your campaign manager is too old to care anymore, and this campaign is over before it even left the ground. Shut up, I spat at him, hating how his words struck home. Kieran's smile grew. Does that bother you, Slade Harrington? He stepped closer to me, his mocha skin almost glowing in the light. I'm sure it does. And yeah, Elis freaking begged me to help you on his knees. He knows the best when he sees it, but you... I'm not sure. Maybe you'll be nothing more than that one-time governor from Minnesota. He snorted. Hell, it looks like you're joining the One-Hit Wonders Club. Next stop, a spot next to Who Let the Dogs Out and the Macarena. God, you're such a prick, I said, breathing hard. I'm surprised you get anywhere with that attitude. Lucky for you, you aren't paying me for my sparkling personality, Kieran breathed, and it took me several moments to realize how close he'd gotten. It was another reason why I freaking detested him. Kieran had an annoying habit of getting in my face, so close almost until our noses were touching as if daring me to close the distance between us. I felt the air fizzling, and excitement jolted through me. When I looked at him, it was like I couldn't stop looking at him. It was as if my eyes wanted to devour him, drink in every last drop of his appearance. Kieran was mixed with Caucasian and African American, but his features were striking. So striking I found myself sinking into the murky pools of his eyes before I could even stop myself. Vicky Sinclair will crush you, Kieran replied, but I won't let her. And what makes you think I'm going to hire you? I demanded, my nostrils flaring at his audacity. You already have, Kieran smirked as he licked his pink lips. I start tomorrow. Then he was gone, leaving the scent of his cologne lingering in the air. I took a deep, agonizing breath, just now realizing how hot and feverish my skin had become. Kieran had a way of getting under my skin, digging out all the things I was trying to hide. He wasn't wrong, though. I was acting cowardly, too afraid to face the real media and answer their questions. I was stuck doing small-town rallies when I should have been in the big cities. Damn him, I gritted my teeth, running a hand through my thick brown hair. I tried to ignore the way my stomach clenched whenever he was near. No, I wouldn't think about that. I was running to become the governor of Minnesota, and I'd bury any doubt about my campaign, or the parts of me I wasn't ready to face. Chapter 2. Slade. You're now 3 points behind in the polls. Vicky Sinclair has launched a campaign called Operation Kill, and you have a meeting with the Treasury Board about overspending, Kiara said upon greeting. Any good news? I asked, trying to sound hopeful. The coffee maker broke, so Dylan got everyone Starbucks, Ciara beamed, her red hair swishing while she walked. Thank God for Dylan. He's doing the Lord's work, I muttered. The hallway buzzed with muted conversations and the rhythmic click of Ciara's heels against the polished floor, and the air was thick with caffeine, ambition, and just a hint of panic, a potent cocktail for politics. Interns hustled between desks, juggling clipboards, coffee cups, and binders like their lives depended on it. One was struggling with a towering pile of folders, wobbling as he walked, while another typed so fast it sounded like her keyboard might break. God, it was like a rush. I loved campaign season. Well, not so much the losing part, but the rest of it? Absolutely. The thrill of everyone's energy was downright contagious, like caffeine for the soul. It was the people, their passion, their determination, that made it all worth it. And these guys? They'd been with me since day one. 4 years of highs, lows, and more coffee than any human should consume. We reached the glass-walled conference room, where a group of staffers waited. The room was packed as I pushed the door open and took a deep breath. I saw Dylan in the back handing out Starbucks coffee, so I strolled over to him, greeting everyone with a large smile. Thank you so much, you're my savior, I laughed. It's nothing, Dylan said, shrugging. Besides, I figured if I pumped you with enough coffee, you'd be high enough to give me another great scoop. You reporters, I scoffed, always after the next story. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only junkie in the room. Dylan laughed, and it wrinkled his brown eyes, making them shine even more. Yeah, trust me. So, when are we sitting down together? I'm sure I can wrangle something out of you before you hit the road. No can do, my friend, I said, grabbing a coffee. I'm tighter than a drum these days. Dylan leaned in just slightly, his smile turning into something a little more mischievous. Tighter than a drum, huh? I'll take that as a challenge. I raised an eyebrow, my heart doing a little flip I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Keep talking, Dylan. You're only digging yourself into a deeper hole. Hey, he said, his voice low. I'm just trying to help you loosen up a bit. I paused, taking a sip of my coffee, but the heat in his gaze almost made me choke. Damn, he knew exactly what he was doing. Well, you're not the only one with a scoop, buddy. Dylan's smile grew wider. I like it when you're this evasive. Makes me want to dig even deeper. I couldn't help but smirk back, though I wasn't entirely sure where this conversation was headed. Just don't expect any dirt. I'm a closed book. Uh-huh, he said, giving me a knowing look. I bet you're full of surprises. Were we even talking about the campaign anymore? I felt my throat go dry and I turned to face the room. Ellis was gesturing at me to hurry over to him, so I gave Dylan a short shrug and headed over to Ellis. Good morning, Ellis. How are you today? My hands won't stop shaking. I've got a bladder the size of a pea, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to pass out. How do you think I'm doing, Slade? Just another day in paradise. Misery loves company, I see, I muttered, and took a sip of my coffee. So, what's on the agenda for today? Kieran will be here any second, so buck up, Ellis grumbled, his face looking a little drawn and haggard. Then after that, I'm taking off. I'm not feeling too well, but I'll be back later on. I promise. Oh. I stared at him with concern. Are you okay? We can just continue when you get back. Ellis smiled thinly, and it finally sank in why we desperately needed Kieran. Ellis was inching closer to 65. He should have retired years ago, but his obsession with this job kept him tethered to it just like the rest of us. There was so much to do in this world, and he, like myself, wanted to see real change. Don't worry about it, kid. Ellis patted my shoulder. Just focus on winning, all right? Make me proud, and don't turn into the disappointment they're all secretly betting on. Great, no pressure. I punched my fist in the air, checking the time. Where is your golden boy? He's late. Actually, I'm right on time, a voice said, coming through the dual glass doors. Everyone went silent as Kieran Blackthorn walked in. Christ, he was stunning. His green eyes practically glowed, and his mocha skin had that perfect smooth tone. His hair was cropped short on the sides but curly and longer on the front, falling just above his brows. Jesus, his navy blue suit fit him like it was custom-made, tight enough to show off his toned frame, but not too much. The man looked like he walked out of a magazine. I felt hot and cold. His eyes, those piercing green eyes, seemed to see right through me, like he knew everything I was trying to hide. My face grew warm, and I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. God, get a grip. Was it hot in here? Was it just me? It was as if the air had thickened, and I couldn't breathe properly. He had this power over me, and it made every part of me want to step back, but I couldn't. Something about him kept pulling me in. Good, you're here. Finally, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I'll give the floor to you. I took a seat at the conference table alongside Ellis, Kiara, and the rest of my team, while Kieran stood front and center with a few other people I hadn't met yet, who I assumed were people he was bringing on to assist us with the campaign. This is my team, he began. Maya, the Hammer Cross, is our senior strategy architect. She's got a reputation for dismantling any opponent's game plan. Jackson, the Fixer Graves, is our troubleshooter. He's the guy who cleans up any mess, no matter how big or messy. Tessa, the Brain King, runs data and analytics. She's the one who sees patterns and predictions no one else can. And then there's Finn, the closer ward. If there's money to be made, he's the one getting those checks signed. I crossed my arms, raising an eyebrow at him. So this is your dream team, huh? And what does that make you, Kieran? The killjoy? And you wonder why you're losing, Kieran sighed, causing everyone around me to chuckle, but I felt my hackles rise. Anyway, these are the people who will be helping me going forward. He picked up a button so that the project screen came down behind him. The team dispersed, finding a seat near the back while Kieran brought up the analytics for the campaign. Kieran's eyes scanned the room as he paced slowly. We're hemorrhaging votes, he began, his tone steady but cutting. People are tired of being talked down to, tired of the rhetoric. They want real solutions, not more promises. The key to winning is not in grandstanding or attacking Vicky Sinclair. It's in focusing on the issues, staying sharp and clear. If we can do that, we don't need to resort to distractions. Sinclair's own words will hang her. Remember back in 2013, she said she'd never use government funds to benefit corporations, yet now she's proposing $1.4 million in tax cuts for big business. He stopped in front of the screen. We can't afford to veer off course. The best campaign is like a blade. It has to stay focused and precise. If we're going to win, we need to become a sword made of the same metal we've been sharpening. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. You don't fight the enemy by attacking their strength. You expose their contradictions. The people will rally behind that. It's simple, but it's powerful. It was the exact opposite strategy we'd been planning with Ellis. I frowned, turning to Ellis, who shrugged, not at all concerned about how Kieran was going to tear apart our entire campaign and turn it into something else. But, I said, feeling off-kilter, what about what we were doing before? I thought we were going to go after Vicky after she did the smear campaign against me attacking my family. Focus on the issues, Mr. Harrington. Kieran spoke as if I were a small child. This isn't tit for tat. She can attack you all she likes while you focus on what people are dealing with. The hardships, the homelessness, the affordability crisis. Stay in your lane. I felt the tension coil in my stomach. But she's slinging mud at me, Mr. Blackthorn. You want me to just sit here and take it? What kind of message does that send? She's attacking my family. And you're telling me to just ignore it? This is politics, not a damn tea party. We go after our opponents, hit them where it hurts, and make them pay for their mistakes. That's the old way of winning, and it works. Kieran's eyes narrowed. And what's your point exactly? He asked, his tone condescending but with an edge of coldness that made me bristle. You think slinging mud back at her will somehow make you look better? It's not a fight you're winning, Slade. The people are tired of the same dirty tricks. They want solutions, not petty retaliation. You think a smear campaign is going to fix homelessness or the affordability crisis? I don't care about the damn strategy right now. If we don't hit back, we look weak. People want a leader who's not afraid to fight, to defend what's his. This isn't just about the issues. It's about showing the voters you won't let anyone walk all over you. You can't let Vicky get away with this crap. This isn't about personal vendettas, Slade. It's about the bigger picture. It's about staying on track, making sure the voters know we care about them, not about petty political games. You can't go down that road and expect to win. Trust me on this. His gaze was unwavering, almost like he was daring me to argue further. Trust him? I scoffed. I couldn't stand him. I turned to Ellis for help, but he gave a leave-it-alone look, and I sighed. Fine. We'll try things your way. Thank you, Kieran replied. Now onto the other matters. Optics. This might not be easy for you to hear, but there's a reason Vicky is attacking your family, and that's because you're never seen with them. I felt my blood heat up, my face flushing with anger as Kieran's words struck deeper than he likely intended. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped my voice tight with barely contained fury. I'm with them all the time. Yeah, well, your wife surely doesn't seem to share that sentiment. Kieran cut in, his voice dripping with venom. She was spotted last week in the Hamptons, cozying up to a known playboy billionaire. Real good look, don't you think? Especially with a Republican candidate who's being absolutely creamed by his Democratic opponent. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I tried to suppress the seething rage crawling up from my chest, but it was like trying to hold back a tsunami. Wow, your personality is a masterpiece, truly. I mean, who else could make arrogance seem like an art form? This isn't about me, Kieran said easily. It's about you. Do you really want to talk about winning? Kieran continued. Your own wife can't stand to look at you, and your kids. Well, I've seen more of them in the tabloids than I've seen on any campaign trail. Maybe they've finally figured out what the rest of us already know. You're more married to your political career than your family. And that's a damn shame. Every nerve in my body was on fire. I could feel the anger curling in my stomach, burning its way up to my chest. My hands balled into fists, my fingers aching from the tightness, but I didn't say a word. I couldn't. If I did, I might have lost it completely. Don't think for 1 second you can keep up the act, he said. You're falling apart, Slade. The voters can see it, and you're too busy pretending it doesn't matter. I forced myself to exhale slowly, my body trembling with the effort. I couldn't let him get to me like this. Not now, not when everything was on the line. But deep down, I knew he was right. The cracks were starting to show, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the damage was already done. Ciara touched my arm, shooting me a warning glance. I propose we fix that, Kieran announced. Cecilia needs to join your campaign as soon as possible. She'll attract female voters and minorities. She's very good at public speaking, and we can use her to help your blunders. You'll be seen as a family man, sympathetic and relatable. Understood? I gritted my teeth. All right, now let's move on to statistics. Kieran continued his presentation, and by the time it was over, rage had consumed me. Fire him, I snapped, pacing Ellis's office like a trapped bull. Ellis massaged his temples, looking way older than 65. No can do, princess. Yes, get rid of him. I want someone else. Anyone else who doesn't... Doesn't what? A voice said by the door, and I whirled around to see Kieran standing there, leaning against the jamb, his face stoic as ever. You know, if you're going to insult me, why don't you wait until I've actually left the building and not 3 feet away in the next room? Obviously, I wanted you to hear me, I hissed, throwing my hands in the air. If I walk out that door, it's for good, Kieran warned, his voice dripping with disdain. And let's be real, you're not exactly swimming in options. No one else is stupid enough to take on a sinking ship like yours. Are you really willing to gamble that? Because right now, you're failing at everything else. Wow, you really do have a way of lighting up the room, Kieran. Like a dumpster fire in the middle of a blackout, I snarled at him. Good riddance. Boys, let's play nice. Ellis raised his hands, trying to ease the tension. Slade, you're losing so badly even the polls are asking for a refund, and Kieran, bless his heart, has generously offered to help me and these tired bones. How about we give it a month? If you still want to throttle him, or if his way of working gives you more heartburn than your last family dinner, then feel free to fire him. Sounds good? Sounds like hell. Fine, but if he steps out of line, he's gone. I moved to storm out of the room, but Kieran caught my bicep, stopping me from going forward. This isn't a game, Slade. When I play to win, he said, his piercing green eyes flashing with annoyance. You're your own worst enemy. If you're going to self-sabotage, do it on your own time. Just stay out of my way. Fascinating. Do you do birthday parties, or is this a one-time performance? I snapped. How about this? We'll steer clear of each other going forward. How about that? Kieran's eyes darted to my lips and my breath caught. He stared at me and then let me go. Fine by me, he said, then quickly walked away. What the hell was that? I thought back to the way his mouth parted, opening slightly as he gazed into my eyes. He wasn't a short man. We were almost the same height, but the way he looked at me just now, it was enough to make my head spin. I turned to look back at Ellis, who winked at me. I grunted and stomped out of the room. Kieran was a thorn in my side, and yet, damn it, he might just be the only one who could get me back on course.
Chapter 3. Kieran. I was a particular man who liked particular things, and Slade Harrington happened to fit that bill right down to a T. See, this man was sinful, delicious, delectable, the kind of man you'd bend over backwards for, or forwards, depending on the mood. And around him, I was always in the mood. Slade was the type of man I used to ruin in boarding school. He was like those prissy, brash men who thought they didn't need a big fat shaft up their asses, only to realize the sheer euphoria once they had one. And I'd absolutely wreck that ass. I wiped away the steam on the large bathroom mirror, staring at myself. My deep green eyes, like prisms gathering every flicker of light, held a tantalizing glow. A strong, chiseled jaw framed my face, with dark stubble dusting my chin and brushing over my Cupid's bow lips. My straight nose and slightly hooded eyes added an intensity I knew well. I looked like a rare aphrodisiac, a treasure few could resist. My caramel chocolate skin was a lure, rich and enticing. I leaned closer, inspecting the reflection. Beauty like this was both a weapon and a curse, and I wielded it mercilessly. Slade was different. He was a politician, which meant he believed the bull flying out of his mouth on a good day. I knew taking this job would be challenging. Ellis had said as much when he all but begged me to take it, and yet, I knew the second he called, I wouldn't refuse. I wanted this job. I wanted to work for Slade, under him. Hell, any way I can. We'd known each other for most of our careers. I was the best campaign manager in the game, having worked on several notable campaigns, from Marcus Lane's gubernatorial race in California to Evelyn Harper's fiery Senate bid in Georgia, and even Victor Prescott's presidential run. My reputation was unmatched, and my results were undeniable. However, working for Slade would prove to be the ultimate challenge. He was ticking. I could see it in the way he spoke and in the way he moved. He was a man being pushed to his limit. His breaking point was about to snap. And I wanted to be there to see it, to watch this man snap and implode. Then I wanted to gather him and pick up all the mangled and crushed pieces. Damn. I braced my hands against the granite countertop, a shiver rolling through me. Calm down, I told myself. This isn't the time to lose control. No, that was for later. I'd lose control when I finally had Slade. After all these years, he'd be mine. I sprayed some cologne on my chest, taking my time to rub lotion into my smooth bronze pecs, moving down to my tight abs, and making sure to oil up my thick legs. I headed to my enormous closet filled with rows upon rows of suits, Doc Martens, and Rolex watches, all color-coordinated, crisp, and clean. The order gave me a sense of calm. I carefully selected a navy suit, remembering the heat in Slade's eyes when he'd seen me in it before. Yes, this color would do. I put product in my curls, smoothing them back until they sat wavy and dewy over my brow. Then I selected a pair of dark brown Doc Martens, strapped on a watch, and grabbed my briefcase. In the kitchen, I measured out 1 cup of oatmeal, 2 cups of matcha, and a scoop of protein powder for my balanced breakfast. I sat at the island table, letting the warm notes of Miles Davis drift into my ears as Siri played jazz. Order. That's what made me relax. Once I was finished, I headed out and locked the door to my penthouse apartment. The drive to the office was quiet, just as I liked, with nothing but the rumble of my Mercedes-Benz beneath my fingertips. I arrived just in time. My team was already pulling into the driveway, and I met them halfway. We all fell into step with one another and made small talk until we got to our own respective offices. Since Ellis had made it clear this was a trial period, I made sure not to fill the office with too much of my things. I kept the walls a muted gray, unadorned, save for a small whiteboard in the corner. A single chair matched the desk, designed ergonomic but impersonal. The room lacked warmth, no photos, no plants, not even a coffee mug to suggest permanence. The large window overlooked the bustling city below, its glass spotless, reflecting the emptiness of the space. It felt more like a waiting room than a workplace. It was cold and empty, and I couldn't have been happier. "Boss," Jackson said, sticking his head through my door. "We've got some problems." And I hadn't even sat down yet. This must be a new record. I bit back my smile and placed my briefcase on my desk, following Jackson out of the room. There were raised voices coming from one of the conference rooms, and I realized that Cecilia had arrived. I clicked my tongue and opened the conference room where Cecilia was pacing, her hands curled into claws because of her blood-red French-tipped nails. She wore a striking red dress with large white pearls that made her look very presidential, and if I didn't know any better, I'd think she was running herself. Her black hair was shiny and glossy, like a raven's wing, styled in a polished updo that complemented her smooth, tawny skin. "Don't you knock?" Slade hissed at me, his blue eyes blazing. God, he looked amazing. As usual, his shirt was half-buttoned, exposing his sharp collarbones, firm pecs, and a dress shirt tucked into an impossibly narrow waist. It was clear he spent time at the gym. His muscles bulged with every move. His shirt was unbuttoned so far down that I could almost see the hint of chest hair dusting his skin. His auburn hair was thick and tousled, with rich, fiery undertones that caught the light. It had a natural wave, similar to my own. Slade had all the features that would make him classically handsome to most: strong jaw, thin lips, long nose. He'd be unremarkable in a crowd. And yet my heart always fluttered when I was next to him. I shoved my hands deep into my pockets, stamping down my amusement. "I apologize. You were making so much noise that I thought we were under siege." "Funny," Slade snorted. "Now if you'll excuse me." "You're the new campaign manager, right?" Cecilia asked, looking right at me with warm hazel eyes. "Blackthorn. Kieran Blackthorn," I said easily, and she held out her hand for me to shake. "Good. I'm glad you're here. This concerns you too," Cecilia said. "Oh? Do tell," I smirked, closing the door behind me. "Leave him the hell out of this," Slade snarled. "No." Cecilia held up her hand to silence him. "We're having a bit of a spat, you see. My husband seems to think I should drop everything and follow him once again on his ridiculous campaign, right before he files for divorce. You can't understand how asinine that sounds to me." She spoke quickly, her voice almost musical. "The kids are still in school, and to pull them out during the middle of the year seems almost cruel. Jace and Stacy said they were fine with it. They like coming on the road with me." "This isn't about you," Cecilia said, her nostrils flaring. "God damn it, Slade. They'd do anything just to spend a single moment alone with you. You need to start thinking about your family and what they need." "And you don't think I've been doing that?" Slade exploded. "I've been running back and forth, between fundraisers and campaigns, and meetings just to meet all your ridiculous deadlines and activities." "Ridiculous?" Cecilia seethed. "How dare you?" I coughed into my fist. "As entertaining as this is, I do need to get back to my work. Slade shot me a dirty look and Cecilia smoothed out her expression. Of course, sorry. What do you think is best? Ellis recommended you, yes? Well, what do you think? What do I think? Now that was a dangerous question. I saw the horror display all over Slade's face and I couldn't help but smile. Mrs. Harrington. Call me Cecilia, she clipped. Please. Cecilia. I think you're a brat. She made a choking noise, but I continued. I think your husband's a brat. You know, I remembered reading once that you used to be in politics. That's how you met. On the sidelines, protesting large corporations' greed that impacted pollution or something like that. It seems to me that after he won, you abandoned all your morals, too caught up with the lifestyle of the rich and famous, forgetting why you're even here. I think that's why you fight with him so much, because you don't remember why you're here. Well, I remember. I remember the girl who would laugh in the faces of all the posh rich guys, who wore clunky boots and hung out in the mud, chained herself to tractors, or blocked off city gates. Where is she? Or is she lost amongst the rich and the famous? Or is she still in there somewhere? I paused, assessing her. No matter what I think about your husband, I can see his heart. He wants to enact real change, and he needs you to do it. Remember your purpose, Cecilia, because if all you think you're here for is to stand around and look pretty, then that's all you'll ever be. She was stunned into silence, but I could tell my words unraveled her. Slade's jaw had dropped and my smirk grew. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a campaign to run, I said, then strolled out of the room. Shut the hell up, you didn't... Ellis burst out laughing. He was so red I thought he was choking. I most certainly did, I said, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. Ellis bellowed so loud everyone in the coffee shop was staring at us. You dog, Ellis boomed. She treats everyone like something she stepped in, and you just waltz in there and told her where to go? Not in so many words, I snickered, but yeah. Damn, Ellis snorted. I knew I hired you for a reason. I chuckled, tearing off a piece of my croissant and chewing it. Well, to say Slade had been pissed at the way I spoke to his wife had been an understatement, but I didn't care. We were going to win, no matter the cost. Slade just didn't realize what the cost was just yet. Ellis regarded me with a soft smile. You've grown so much, Kieran. I wish your father was alive to see it. A pang shot through my chest when he mentioned him. My father had been a great man, a respected fixer in the political community. It was how he met Ellis, and they became good friends. Most people didn't know this, but Ellis was like my godfather. After my father died, he took care of me, helping me get into boarding school and teaching me everything I know about political science. Thank you, that means a lot, I replied easily. Look, my health isn't the best, Ellis leaned over on the table. I don't want to scare you, but it's not looking too good.
I slowly set my croissant down and wiped my mouth with a napkin, taking my time to gather my thoughts. What are you saying, Ellis?
Ellis smiled shakily. Parkinson's, you know? They say, well, he smoothed a hand over his gray hair. I might need to come stay with you for the remaining time I have left. I took a stuttering breath. Parkinson's was an ugly disease, and I knew I'd be forced to watch my mentor and friend deteriorate before my eyes. Of course. I swallowed around the knot in my throat. I'll have round-the-clock care, trust me, you'll want for nothing. He smiled at me and patted my hand. Thank you, my boy. He sighed, looking around the cafe. It's hard to say, but I'll miss this the most. The rush of the campaign, the people, the interns. In a few months it will all feel like a dream. Well, that's if your Slade is willing to keep me on, I muttered, eating my food. He seems like he's ticking or something. That's because he is, Ellis scoffed. Look, I've known him since he was a boy, and there's something you need to understand about him. Slade is a damn good politician. People believe in him, but the worst part, he doesn't believe in himself. That's where you come in. Me? I sputtered. What do I have to do with this? Being a campaign manager isn't just about fixing things. Sometimes there are problems you can't solve, which means you have to get into the trenches alongside your candidate and pull them out. Remember this. The brain and the heart often want different things, but when they align, that's where the magic happens. And Slade needs pulling out? Oh yeah, 100%, Ellis said seriously. Don't miss the signs, or else you'll have a candidate that shows up pissed drunk talking about running for president of the moon instead of the country. I snorted a laugh and Ellis patted my arm. Touché. You've got some nerve. I heard Slade's voice before I saw him stomping into my office like some crazed ape. His hair looked wild as ever, his shirt gaping, forcing my eyes to dip down to his firm chest. I cleared my throat and signaled to Jackson to wrap it up so that I could have a moment alone with Slade. Jackson packed up his laptop, coffee, and all the other things he'd left on my desk before striding out of the room. Slade, I sighed, always a pleasure. That crap you said to my wife was completely uncalled for and way out of line. He seethed, slamming the door shut behind him. Was it, though? Yes, it was. I chuckled at how irate he seemed to be and slowly stood. I don't think so. I think it was exactly what she needed to hear. Did she join the campaign? Yes, but so? Nothing to worry about. I grinned, bracing my hands against my desk and leaning on it. Now, to focus on what's important. Did you know the thing about governors is they spend 4 years telling you how broke the state is, then spend $1 billion campaigning to keep their job? Crazy. Slade's jaw worked and he shook his head. You can't just gloss over things you said to me. That was way out of line, and it's just another tick against you. Hold on, let me write that down in my things I didn't ask for journal. Screw you, Slade snapped. Do you think I need you? Your haughty attitude and the way you boss everyone around? Well, I don't. I was doing just fine without you, and I certainly don't need you going forward. Amazing. If only I had a trophy for unsolicited brilliance, I replied, and chuckled when he looked like he wanted to spit fire at me. How do you relax, Slade? What? He demanded. How do you relax? I reiterated, then sat back down in my chair and noticed how his eyes zeroed in on my chest. Slade's tongue darted out to lick his lips. I jog. Run. I mean, not that it's any of your business, he replied testily. Good. Go for a jog. Tomorrow you have a town hall meeting to answer questions from voters, and then we hit the road, I said. But are you sure we're ready? As we'll ever be. I have Jackson working on your response to Vicky Sinclair, and then we come out swinging so hard she won't know what hit her. Oh, Slade breathed. Thank you, I guess. I stood, rounding the table and forcing him to back up, noticing how his pupils had dilated from how close we'd gotten. Slade was breathing heavily, his massive chest rising and falling, his lips wet and delicious. It took everything in me not to lean forward and take his bottom lip into my mouth and latch onto it. Of course, Governor. I am at your disposal. Use me however you see fit. I all but purred, then strolled out of the room. Chapter 4. Kieran. Patience. It was something I was running thin on, especially with Slade, looking the way that he looked, being the way that he was, ticking and ticking and ticking like at any moment he would snap. I watched him now in the town hall, the crew preparing his mic and dabbing away sweat from his brow, the cameramen pointing him which way to turn his body and how to look this way or that way. He wore a dark blue navy blazer and slacks and a light blue shirt that plunged. The distinct fashion choice always had my blood pumping hotter. He was a vision, and my patience was running thin. I wasn't normally like this. Normally I could wait, plan, and see if my prey would come to me, to see if they would take the bait, but Slade had proven to be formidable. Then again, perhaps he didn't know what he was. Maybe he had no clue what he needed from me, at least not yet. If that were the case, then I'd have to be patient. Mic check, I instructed one of the crewmen. Mic check, they repeated, and they readjusted Slade's mic on his shirt, giving me a full side view of his chest. It was almost obscene. Adjust his shirt, I said to the makeup artist who nodded and did one more button up. Fix his hair. Okay, now, I was just trolling. I smiled to myself and stepped a few paces back, almost running into Dylan. Sorry, I chuckled. He flushed. No, you can run into me anytime, he chuckled. How's our boy doing? Our boy? I kinked a brow at him and turned to look back at the town hall. The town hall was an old brick building with tall windows and white trim, sitting right in the middle of town. Tiny American flags stuck out from the bushes by the shiny double doors. Inside, rows of metal chairs were packed with people holding programs or little flags. On stage, a big banner read, "United we stand, stronger together." Red, white, and blue decorations hung everywhere, and two tall American flags framed the microphone in the middle. The smell of coffee and marker ink with the chatter of the crowd and a faint patriotic tune played from the speakers. "As well as can be expected," I responded easily. "We'd spent all last night as a team prepping for this, then we'd be on the road." Dylan was dressed in simple beige slacks, a striped button up top, and his press badge hung around his neck. He was attractive in the classical sense, curly brown hair, round cheeks with freckles on his nose. Certainly attractive to bend over any available surface, but a bit too plain for my liking. Besides, he didn't seem like the type to put up a fight, and I liked a man with a little more grit. But I could see why Slade liked him enough. Dylan seemed to have an easygoing nature. "I just hope this doesn't tank like the last time," Dylan said. "It would suck to have to report bad news. I hate having to do that." "Oh, news is news, isn't it?" I pointed out. "Doesn't bad news sell faster than good news?" Dylan shrugged. "Yeah, I know, but Slade's my friend. You all are, which is kind of pathetic. But when I first got into this business, I was just a stupid reporter from Alabama. Slade was the first governor to give me the time of day. Even now, he'll sometimes do exclusive interviews with me, even though he shouldn't be talking to the press at all. And Sierra would crack my nuts if she saw how many snippets Slade gives me on the regular." I laughed at the visual. "Yeah, she does seem like a nutcracker." "Yeah," Dylan sighed. "Anyways, I won't keep you, but it's good to have you on the team." He gave me a slow once-over, and when I stared back at him impassively, I noticed his cheeks darkened. Just head out." I watched him scurry off and then turned back to the town hall. People were slowly starting to fill the room, and I knew it was showtime. Ciara came to stand beside me with her clipboard in hand, and several other people watched alongside us. "Good evening, America. I am your host, Christine Christie, and I welcome all of you tonight." Christine stepped onto the stage, waving to the cheering crowd. Her sharp green eyes swept across the room, missing nothing. She wore a sleek charcoal gray suit over a bold red blouse, giving her a look of sharp confidence, and her black hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail. She moved with purpose, shaking Slade's hand as he approached and offering him a polite smile. Turning back to the audience, she raised her hand in another quick wave. Adjusting the microphone with a practiced touch, she signaled it was time to get started. Her focus now locked on the task ahead. "Welcome, Governor Slade Harrington of Minnesota. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here." "Thank you for having me," Slade said, flashing them a dazzling smile. He waved, settling into his chair with the easy posture of a man who had done this 100 times before. She let the quiet stretch just long enough to make the crowd restless before starting. "Governor Slade, gun violence remains a top issue for voters. Your stance on protecting the Second Amendment is clear, but critics argue your policies have been ineffective in reducing these tragedies. If re-elected, how do you plan to change that?" "We've already laid the groundwork for stronger background checks and increased funding for community safety initiatives. What we need now is more time to see these measures take full effect." Christine's expression didn't shift. "You've had 4 years. What specifically will be different in your next term?" "We're focusing on enforcement," he replied, "cracking down on illegal sales and ensuring existing laws work as intended. Unlike Vicky Sinclair's sweeping bans, my plan respects law-abiding gun owners while targeting criminals." She let the pause linger, then tilted her head. Sweeping bans or decisive action? Her proposal to close loopholes and ban assault weapons has gained traction, especially among suburban voters. Is your plan bold enough to keep up? Slade straightened. Her proposals sound bold but lack practicality. Bans won't stop criminals. They'll only punish responsible gun owners. My approach is about balance, protecting rights while improving safety. Before he could elaborate, she cut in. Balance hasn't stopped mass shootings. Can you guarantee voters your plan will make a measurable impact? Or will this be another term of waiting for results? The crowd stirred, a ripple of murmurs passing through the room. It was then I saw Slade falter. No, no, not yet. I inched closer, hoping to catch his gaze, but he was staring off into the distance. We had gone over this, but it was harder to plead your case when you were already the governor and change hadn't been enacted. Slade's jaw tightened slightly. I can guarantee that we'll continue to prioritize safety without sacrificing freedom. Voters deserve solutions that work, not quick fixes that grab headlines. Christine's smile was sharp, almost predatory. Quick fixes or leadership? Because Sinclair's quick fixes seemed to resonate with a growing portion of the electorate. Let's move on. Things didn't get any better. God damn it, I whispered. Slade was floundering. She was beating him over the head, and he needed to figure out how to get from under her, or else he'd remain backed against the wall. The audience shifted, their attention locked on the exchange. Slade's composure held, but the room felt charged. Beside me, Kiara scribbled notes furiously, while I caught a few whispers from the crowd. The mediator's questions weren't just tough, they were relentless, and she wasn't done yet. Let's shift gears, Governor Slade. Homelessness has surged across the country, including in key districts of our state. Many voters are asking why, under your leadership, we've seen these numbers climb while housing costs remain out of reach for middle and lower-income families. What's your response? Homelessness is a complex issue tied to systemic challenges, mental health, addiction, and economic disparity. My administration has increased funding for shelters and introduced programs to help people transition back into the workforce. Christine didn't miss a beat, yet rents are skyrocketing and homeownership is slipping out of reach for the average voter. Critics argue your efforts only scratch the surface while offering no real relief for working families. What do you say to that? We're expanding affordable housing projects and offering tax incentives for developers to build more low-income units. These changes take time, but we're making progress. Not fast enough if you ask me. Okay, now we'll be taking questions from the audience. Several hands shot in the air and I bit my thumb, praying to God that Slade would be able to field these questions. A man in the front row raised his hand and Christine handed him the mic. Governor, my name is Ed Marcus. I'm a small business owner and my rent's gone up 30% in the past year. How am I supposed to stay afloat? You talk about programs, but I'm still waiting for any real help. Slade adjusted himself in his seat, leaning forward. I hear you. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. That's why we've introduced grants and low-interest loans to help owners like you, whether the cost of living increases. The man frowned. Grants and loans don't lower my rent. Christine's voice sliced through. Governor, the audience wants to know, what's your administration doing right now to address the rising cost of living, not just for businesses, but for families? We're working with local governments to cap rent increases and expand tenant protections while creating more jobs to offset these costs. Before he could continue, a woman in a plaid blazer raised her hand. Jobs don't pay the rent when wages are stagnant, she said sharply. How do you plan to make sure pay keeps up with inflation? Slade balked, and this was turning into a freaking disaster. We're pushing for wage growth through business incentives and workforce development programs. Raising wages while keeping businesses competitive is a delicate balance, he stammered. There was blood in the water now. Governor, is balance enough for voters who feel like they're drowning? Next question, Christine interjected, her eyes locked on him. Hands shot up again, the audience growing more animated as Christine guided the conversation, leaving Slade visibly grappling to stay in control. Oh God, what the hell was happening right now? I couldn't make sense of it. Slade was a natural at these things. Why was he suddenly floundering for a response? My anger simmered as Christine fired another question, her tone sharp, relentless. I'd had enough. I signaled for a break, my hand slicing the air. Slade didn't wait. The second the word was out, he ripped off his mic and stormed off stage. I sprinted after him, weaving through the backstage. I found him in his dressing room, his back to me, yanking at his collar like it was suffocating him. He paced in short, agitated bursts, his breaths shallow and uneven, as though the walls were closing in. What the hell, Slade? I snapped at him. These questions I could have answered in my sleep. Why are you up there acting like a goddamn baboon? Cecilia wants to take my kids away from me. What? I gaped at him. Slade shook his head manically, his eyes filling with tears. She said she'll come, but in exchange we get divorced. She wants full custody of our kids. God! I seethed, running a hand through my curly hair. Jesus freaking Christ! The nerve of that woman. And let me guess, she said all of this to you yesterday? Right before the town hall meeting? Slade nodded, but he looked absolutely wrecked. I love my children, Kieran. He made a choking sound. I love them, but I love my job too. I love this, and she's making me choose, and I can't freaking choose. Okay, all right. I stepped towards him and cupped his face. Calm down. Everything will be okay. I took him into my arms and ran my hand over the nape of his neck, feeling the boulder-sized knots. Damn, he was pent up. I knew he and his wife were on the verge of divorce, but it was clear to me now that they've been on bad terms for a while now. It was part of the reason why I thought Slade was a ticking time bomb. Breathe with me, I instructed, following the sound of my voice. Slade did as I instructed, and I tried not to preen under him. In my arms, he was solid muscle, firm and sturdy, and absolutely delicious. I imagined taking him then, spreading him out on the desk and lavishing his body with kisses and signing my name with my tongue into his skin. I'd go slow, take my time because he deserved that. I dragged my nose along the sharp edge of his jaw and listened to his breath intake. I'm going to give you an order. Slade tensed, but I pressed closer to him. Listen to the sound of my voice, I breathed. Can you do that? I felt him nod. Good, I whispered, smoothing my hands down his firm back. You're nothing, an empty shell, a husk. You're going to go out there and be the governor they expect you to be, who they elected you to be. I know you said you can't choose, but you already have. It was written before you were even born. Your family needs you, but the people of Minnesota need you more. They're crying out for you. Their leader, their commander-in-chief. Got that? Slade pulled back, his eyes liquid and wide. Yes. We'll deal with Cecilia later, I promise. I swore to him, and then gently released him. They needed to get back before the break was over. Remember why you're here, Slade. You're here to change the world, to be a part of something greater than yourself, I said to him. Now go out there and do it. Slade took a step back and took a deep breath. He fixed his collar, wiped the tears from his eyes, and nodded. Okay. Thank you, by the way. You're welcome, I said, then watched him walk out the door. I stood there for several seconds, feeling like my knees might buckle. A command. I had given him a command. God, how long has it been since No, I couldn't go there. I ran a trembling hand over my face and realized with a start that I was freaking hard, straining, all because of one simple command. Jesus, if this continued, my patience would be obliterated. And we're back. Christine's voice rang out, snapping the room to attention. The energy shifted as the spotlight turned back on Slade, his eyes glinting. All right, Governor, she continued, unfazed. Let's talk about inflation. The cost of living has skyrocketed under your watch. How do you plan to fix this in your next term? Inflation is a direct result of reckless policies, not just here, but across the nation. If we want relief, we need to start by cutting wasteful spending and reducing taxes for working Americans. Christine raised an eyebrow. Cutting taxes, doesn't that risk deeper budget cuts? Vicki Sinclair has a very different approach. She's pushing for higher taxes on the wealthy to redistribute the wealth more fairly. Vicki Sinclair's approach is nothing more than a tired, failed idea. Raising taxes on the wealthy won't help anyone except her political allies. What it will do is choke small businesses and everyday workers who will pay the price. But those small businesses aren't paying their fair share either. Sinclair's plan promises more funding for essential services, including healthcare and education. What's your plan to ensure everyone benefits, not just the top tier? Everyone benefits when we empower the economy through lower taxes and deregulation. Vicki's idea of more government intervention only stifles growth and increases dependence. We need an economy that thrives on opportunity, not handouts. Christine's smile was tight now, but she pressed on. So, you're saying the solution is to continue down the same path, while wages remain stagnant and people struggle to make ends meet? Slade leaned in, his voice low and controlled. I'm saying the solution is to stop throwing money at broken systems and start creating real jobs. We need to give people the tools to succeed, not more handouts to keep them reliant. Sinclair's policies are the same ones that have failed this country for decades. He was back. The audience's response was electric. They cheered, some even standing, the air thick with energy. I couldn't help but beam. Slade had flipped the script, landing jab after jab with the precision of a seasoned fighter. And goddamn it, didn't it make me proud? Dylan came back around us, his notebook in hand while he beamed. Did you see that? Kiara whispered to us. He's not even breaking a sweat. Damn Skippy, Dylan hooted. I laughed, shaking my head. Christine looked rattled but tried to recover. So, what exactly will you do differently? You've been in office for 4 years. What new changes can voters expect under your leadership? New leadership, Christine. I've proven I can get things done. Sinclair's plan will only drag us backward. If she gets elected, we'll be fighting for scraps while the government grows even bigger. The crowd roared in approval. Hell yeah, Dylan whispered and pumped his fist in the air. Kiara laughed, and they hugged. I nodded my approval as Christine wrapped up the interview. Slade smiled and waved to everyone, but when his gaze caught mine, something simmered dangerously close to the edge, and I felt as if every inch of me had reached a boiling point. A command. I had given him a command. He was mine.
Chapter 5. Slade. Why can't you come back to the house, Daddy? Stacy whined, clutching onto my neck with her skinny arms. Her pigtails bounced as we walked to the sleek black Lincoln Town car, waiting for them at the curb. You know I can't, honey. Your daddy has his own place, I answered, kissing her plump cheeks that had gone cherry pink from the cold. Be a good girl and go with your mother. I'll see you guys next week. But why? Stacy whined again, pouting now. It was late. I could practically feel the impatience wafting off Cecilia and Jace as they waited for us by the car. Jace with his face buried in the latest PS4 game, standing almost as tall as my wife, his curly brown hair so shaggy and long that it definitely needed a cut. He was like any normal 14-year-old with an attitude problem and pissed off at the world, and I knew he wasn't exactly thrilled to be pulled out of school and set to be following me around the country on a campaign trail. But we'd barely spent any time together the last few years, and I knew he was eager to be close to me again. And so was I. What they didn't tell you about being governor was that it was a lonely, thankless job. Everything was your problem and yours alone to fix. A large part of me missed my family, badly. Cecilia and I had talked about me quitting 1,000,000 times, but it would decimate the Harrington name. There was no way I could be a one-term governor. Things like that just didn't happen. Stacy clung to me, her pout deepening every step we took. All right, all aboard. I tried to laugh, but she just glared at me. Come on, sweetie, I'll see you in a few days, I promise. No, Daddy, she shrilled. You come with us now. I have things to show you at home, and Grandma made cookies that you haven't even tried yet. Stacy, Cecilia clipped. You know Daddy lives somewhere else now, come on. Mr. Charles would like to go home too, all right? Remember what we talked about? It's not nice to waste people's time. I frowned at her words. Mr. Charles was the car driver, and he was being paid handsomely to sit there idle. It would be a few days before I saw her again, so I understood why she was throwing a bit of a tantrum. Be good, I lifted her, ready to pass her off to her mother, but she held on tighter. Tantrum it is then. No, Daddy! You promised, she wailed. I forcefully grabbed her arms and gently passed her off to Cecilia while she cried. I'll be back soon, I promise. I'll tell you later tonight, and we can talk about the cookies. It's not the same, she cried, and the sound was like a knife twisting in my gut. I forced a smile. All right, Jace. I clapped my son on the shoulder, who finally looked up from his video game. I'll see you in a few days. We can go over your new ideas for the campaign. I already have Kiara working on it. He's got to focus on his schoolwork, Cecilia clipped. Ah, come on, Mom, Jace moaned. I can get it done and in the meantime help Dad with his campaign. We'll discuss it later, Jace, Cecilia said, already climbing into the front seat. Jace rolled his eyes, but I winked at him. We'd figure out a way to work on it together. Bye, Dad, he muttered. See you later. Once he got inside, I slammed his car door and watched the car peel off from the curb. The city streets blurred behind me as I headed to my 3-bedroom penthouse apartment. The sleek granite countertops of the walls seemed to glare at me as I stepped inside. The space felt modern and sterile, almost too perfect, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to disturb its stillness. I shrugged off my jacket and let it fall unceremoniously onto the kitchen stool before collapsing onto the couch. Ready to settle in for a long night of nothingness, I loosened my tie and leaned back. Cecilia and I had agreed to separate last year. That's why I ended up in this penthouse, not far from the campaign office and close enough to the house for the kids to visit. It had been an entire year of back and forth, but by now they'd gotten used to it. Stacy acted up sometimes, but deep down, I think she knew I wasn't coming back. I undid the buttons on my shirt, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and slumped back down on the couch. It had been ages since I'd been able to unwind like this. Between the relentless campaign schedule and endless meetings, it was nothing but go, go, go. That town hall had started off as a train wreck but ended surprisingly well. Even some of my answers had gone viral. Then there was Kieran. God, my throat went dry just thinking about him. He was a force of nature. Those green eyes of his, like falling into the ocean, had a way of disarming me. My face warmed at the thought, which felt strange. I'd worked with thousands of people over the years, and none of them had ever sparked that kind of reaction in me. What was his deal anyway? I'd known him for years, yet I felt like I still knew nothing about him. We were gaining momentum in the polls, which was great, and Ellis swore by him, but there was something about Kieran I couldn't figure out. Not odd, exactly. Controlled? Too controlled. Even when he'd hugged me, it had felt restrained, like he was holding himself back from doing something more. I shuddered and forced myself to stop thinking about it. I'd been with Cecilia since college, the only woman I ever loved. There wasn't room for anyone else. "A penny for your thoughts?" a voice said, making me jump. I whirled around, laughing when I saw Dylan standing next to me. I'd been staring up at the large Greyhound bus where security was loading everything before we officially hit the road. The air was crisp and clean, the sky a bright blue that radiated warmth like heaven's hearth. Around us, people buzzed with excitement as they hefted their bags onto the bus. It was this kind of thrill I lived for. My family would be riding in the limo trailing behind us, but we'd all stay together on the Greyhound for the ride. Dylan was dressed in a crisp white button-down, his press badge swinging from his neck as he chewed on a piece of licorice. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. "Ciara?" He pointed the floppy stick of licorice toward her. She stood a few feet away, handing out snacks like the team mom she'd unofficially become. I reached out, yanked it from his hand, and took a bite, laughing at his mock outrage. "Hey!" Dylan pouted, though there was a twinkle in his eye. "Anyway, what were you thinking about so hard? I called your name twice." "Nothing. Just life." "Ah, well, as long as you weren't about to jump ship, I guess it's okay." Dylan flashed that sunny smile of his, the one that made you feel like everything would be all right. "Are you fishing for a story?" I asked, raising a brow. "I'm always fishing, my friend," Dylan laughed. "Come sit with me on the bus. That'll give the press enough to talk about for at least a week." I threw my head back and laughed, grabbing my carry-on bag and following him onto the Greyhound. We took a seat near the front, and I allowed myself to relax into Dylan's easy conversation. It was the reason I hired him in the first place. He'd been a struggling journalist, itching for his next big scope, so I gave it to him, along with a job offer, and he jumped at the chance. I wouldn't say we were friends exactly, but I got along with him easily enough. To me, he was very much a part of my team and becoming dangerously close to family at this point, like Ciara and Ellis. Speaking of Ellis, I looked around the bus trying to spot Ellis and saw him sitting next to Kieran and Ciara near the back, poring over the notes. My mind drifted to our next campaign stops. Minneapolis-St. Paul, the Twin Cities, seemed like an obvious choice. Community centers or the Minneapolis Convention Center would be perfect venues to engage with voters on key issues like urban development, healthcare, and education. Rochester was another priority, with its reputation as a hub for healthcare and innovation. A stop near the Mayo Clinic or a local business park could open important conversations about healthcare policy and economic growth, aligning perfectly with our message. So, Dylan fished and I chuckled at his eager expression. What do you think of your new campaign manager? I noticed things weren't exactly sunshines and rainbows when you first met. If he wasn't so brilliant, I would have throttled him a long time ago, I muttered. No, he just gets under my skin. Wait. I turned to him in my seat. This is off the record, right? Cross my heart, hope to die. Dylan beamed at me and I trusted him. Sure, I chuckled. Anyways, I don't know much about him anyway, other than the fact that he's a real ballbuster. But so far I like the results. Are you distracted by how insanely hot he is? Dylan finished for me. I balked and felt my face heat. What? I totally am, Dylan said. His eyes, wow. I've never seen a black person with such amazing eyes. God, I'm totally fangirling right now. Should I call him over here? No. Dylan flushed. No, I'm just saying, he's got an interesting rap sheet if you catch my heavy drift. I kinked a brow. Oh? Do tell. Dylan leaned forward. Slept with a lot of guys. High-profile ones. Some of them are even senators, so yeah. He's the best of the best, I think. Oh, so he's gay? I wasn't sure why that surprised me. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't think he was gay, but then again, I never really thought about stuff like that. You didn't know? Dylan laughed. Oh my. I didn't normally make assumptions like that anyway. I never think about stuff like that. I shifted in my chair, wondering why not knowing that irked me so much. It didn't matter though. We leaned more toward progressive conservatives, so having a gay campaign manager didn't mean anything to me. Aside from that, we treated everyone in our team with respect. Anyways, Dylan lowered his voice. Some say he even slept with Matthew Carney. My eyes widened. No way. Way, Dylan smirked. He gets around, but I guess working in the circles that he works in, it's easier. Matthew Carney wasn't just anyone. He was a sitting Supreme Court justice, one of the most influential figures in the country. His appointment had been a historic moment, a culmination of decades of legal brilliance and a political fight that had gripped the nation. His decisions shaped laws, changed lives, and carried weight in every corner of the country. If the rumors were true, it wasn't just scandalous, it was monumental, tying Kieran to someone with almost unmatched power and prestige. And he was working on my team. Ellis was right, we were lucky to have him. And yet, the idea of Kieran sleeping with so many men rankled me. Carney was what? In his 50s? How old was Kieran when he slept with him? Dylan took out his laptop and put on some headphones, clearly trying to get some work done during the long drive. I leaned back in the chair, and before I could blink, I was falling asleep. No, I vetoed immediately, pacing the hotel room as if moving might hammer my point home. That's too far off from our messaging. We need to stick to the message. Screw the message if people are starving, Kieran cut in, his voice smooth, calm, and cutting all at once. His sleeves were rolled up on his black shirt, exposing strong forearms, and he looked far too composed for someone disagreeing with me so fundamentally. Kira slumped in her chair, her heels kicked off, an empty takeout container balanced precariously on the edge of the desk. Dylan was tucked into the far corner, scribbling notes on a yellow pad like he was documenting history in the making. Ellis leaned against the window, rubbing his face with one hand, the weight of travel and endless meetings clear in his slumped shoulders. I didn't care. I was too wound up to let this go. People don't vote for suffering, I snapped. They vote for hope. They vote for promises, catchy quotes and gimmicks. That's what sticks in their minds when they're pulling the lever. Catchy quotes don't fill a damn plate, Kieran shot back. He sat forward on the black leather sofa, his elbows braced on his knees, his green eyes drilling into me. You think people want sound bites when their rent's overdue? When their kids go to bed hungry? They don't need clever lines. They need solutions. And we're going to give them solutions, I countered. But we have to get their attention first. You know what they remember? Reagan's Morning in America, Obama's Hope and Change. The message matters. Yeah, but those were backed by action, Kieran said. People believed in those messages because they weren't just slogans. They were promises people could feel. That's what we need to do. Not gimmicks, not empty words. Real plans. Real change. I threw up my hands, exasperated. So you want to go full Reagan in '85? What, a press tour of soup kitchens? Kieran smirked, but there was no humor in it. No, I want to be real with people. Tell them what's wrong and how we're going to fix it. No fluff, no gloss, just honesty. Honesty doesn't win elections? Maybe not, but it keeps you in office, Kieran sighed. And it sure as hell keeps people alive. All right, enough, Ellis groaned, stepping between us with a weary hand raised like a referee. You're both right, okay? We need the message and the substance. But it's past midnight, and if we don't call it a night, none of this is going to matter because we'll be too damn tired to make it work tomorrow. Fine, I muttered, running a hand through my hair, but we're revisiting this in the morning. Can't wait, Kieran said dryly. Kiera grabbed her notes and all but fled the room with Elis and Dylan on her heels. I went to the minibar and took out a small bottle of whiskey, pouring a small glass for myself. I turned toward the window, letting the cool glass temper my frustration. The city lights blurred beneath my breath, and somewhere in through it all, I knew Kieran had a point. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Nor was my ego. You don't have to fight me so much, you know, he murmured. Yes, I do. It keeps me young, I said, not moving from my spot. It was my hotel room, but I wasn't even the least bit tired. I finished my glass and poured another, then Kieran one as well. Why do you have to be such a jackass? Straight to the point, I see, Kieran replied, coming to stand beside me. Because that's what gets you to change, nothing more or less. I snorted. You could at least pretend to be civil to me sometimes. I have my ideas, and you have yours. It doesn't mean we can't work together. See, that's where you're wrong, Harrington, Kieran said, his tone sharp. I win campaigns for a living. You don't. Your ideas are archaic. That's why you're losing. I've turned governors into senators, senators into Supreme Court nominees. I've won 16 back-to-back campaigns in less than 4 years. When people hear the name Kieran Blackthorn, they shudder. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. I know what I'm doing. It's you who can't be civil with me. Can you blame me? I turned only to realize he was standing so close to me, close enough that our noses almost brushed. I swallowed hard, staring into his green eyes that cut through the room, bright and sharp like emerald daggers. Did something else happen? I mean, with your wife? He asked, flicking his curly black hair out of his brow. I realized that it fell into sleek ebony waves, like the light upon a pitch-black sea. Why do you ask? I drained my cup. She's on board. You got what you wanted. Kieran's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, I guess you're right. I poured another one, and I was well on my way to becoming drunk if I kept up with this. So, tell me about yourself. Dylan told me some interesting things. Oh? Kieran answered. What things? How you conduct your business. Ah. Kieran pursed his lips. We're all adults. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. I am their campaign manager. I fix the things they can't, and sometimes I become more... More? I probed. His green eyes fixated on mine. Yes, more. I'm a particular man, Mr. Harrington. I like particular things. I have no idea what that means, I replied, suddenly feeling breathless. Kieran's smile grew. It means, I don't think you could handle my particularities in terms of taste. Try me, I said. I'm not as prude as you think I am. Besides, from what Dylan told me, you seem to know how to handle yourself in any given situation. Kieran regarded me. Why do you want to know? I'm just making conversation. You're lying, Kieran smirked. Maybe. I chuckled. I don't know. I'm drunk, it's late, and talking to you is the best entertainment I've had all week. So, humor me. Something flared in Kieran's eyes and he wet his lips. Fine. Since we're talking so openly, what I mean is that I like it dirty. My breath caught. How dirty? Rough. Filthy. I like pain. Immense, searing pain. And then insurmountable pleasure. Jesus, my throat went dry. I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rise to my collar. Oh, I said dumbly. I assume you have a type? What would you do to me? Kieran's gaze dragged over my body. Yes, and you'd fit that type. I think we'd both know what I'd do to you, Mr. Harrington. You'd be the prey. I'd have to chase you down, stalk you, and screw you within an inch of your life. Give you insurmountable pleasure, that kind you couldn't even begin to imagine. So, like dominance and submission stuff? Kieran regarded me. No. This is way more eviscerating, but you aren't ready for that yet. He drained his glass and slammed it down on the table. That's to say, this was all a hypothetical conversation, and you aren't mine. So this conversation is entirely moot. Good night, Mr. Harrington. Slade, I said, my voice coming out raspy. Call me Slade. Kieran paused at the door. His tawny skin had a subtle sheen, smooth and perfectly balanced. I will call you whatever the hell I want to call you. Deal with it. Then the door clicked shut. I released a harsh breath, wondering when my knees started shaking.